fit that in just before it turned on, I think. Sneaky. I'm going to talk a little this morning about the 5 elements. Mahabhuta, the great elements. Mahabhutas. B-H-U-T-A-S, I think it is. Maha. And Maha is great. Bhutas means element. Unless I looked up the wrong definition. It could be. I'm sure someone will correct me. You may already know earth, water, fire, earth, water, fire, air, and then there's space and consciousness. All of them. Maybe there's some more. There probably are, but from our vantage point, should we call it, that's probably what we're looking at. So let's get intimate with that. So I'm going to take you through it. Now you can either have your eyes open or closed. Important thing is to hold still and keep your back straight. It's not actually a conventional meditation or shikantaza, it's a contemplation. So I'll talk us through it. So we'll begin with a bell. First, bring your awareness towards your bodily form. This is the earth element. This is the element that is contracting, holding together, retaining a form. There's a lot of tension there in that, as I'm sure you can be aware of. Earth, form, solidity. Next, move your awareness to that aspect of your existence that is liquid water. All the movement that's happening in the body. You may have some awareness, may not have too much. It will vary from person to person and from time to time. Sometimes we can actually hear the water flow. Water element. Now move your consciousness, your awareness, just like a circle of light that expands or contracts depending on what it is appropriating. Now move to the element of fire or heat. Notice the warmth in the body. Some places on the body, bodily form are warmer than others. Some we're directly aware of, and some are hidden or out of sight or out of touch or out of reach with a consciousness. Now move the awareness to the air, or to the air element. And this has to do with any kind of movement of air. This is the expansive. The body, the earth is contracting, the air is expanding. It expands out of your bowels, it expands out of your lungs. Some kind of expansion is happening. So now move to the next element, which is space. The personal feeling of space around you, space in all the body cavities or openings. There is space. Obvious ones are the mouth, the ears, openings. Move your awareness to those. And notice how we tend to abandon the other ones or distract ourselves or ignore the earth element as we go to, say, space or water or fire. Just notice. Don't have to go backwards, just notice that. And then we go to consciousness, which we experience through the various forms that are rising and falling away. Not only these, the bhutas, but also the way they arise in the form of the sense fields, the objects, sounds, smells, taste, touch, sights, thoughts, coming and going. Quite a complicated matrix we have here, that we are, or that we think we are. All of this, the understanding is, and there's no proof of any of this, but the understanding is by those who, including the Buddha and other teachers down through the centuries, point at the situation in a similar way. They don't necessarily agree that the 5 elements, 6 elements, 3 elements, 4 elements, you count them, are going back into where they started, in the ground, in the fire, in the air, in the water. They're going back into that. This situation arose so that you could see who you are. You are not separate from the awakened one. If you don't see that, or that doesn't somehow show up for you, then you may take a few trips down into the elements and then back out again through the bardos, through the various levels or intermediate states. Traditionally, there are 6 of those. We won't go into those here today. But some kind of basic foundational understanding of form as we sit here. The flow of liquid, the expansion of air, fire in our, as they say, fire in our belly. Space, the space around us, the space between thoughts, the space between sounds. Just observe with no comment. And notice how easy it is to access all of this. There's really no struggle at all to go to the sense of earth, to go to the sense of air. Some meditation practices would have you even focus on and somewhat attach to, say, the air coming out of the body in order to help ground you. If you feel that's necessary, then do it. But consciousness will find the form that it needs if you don't meddle. Just observe. And in this way, get to know yourself on a really deep level, beyond opinions, projections, points of view, contrasts, life and death. There's only one moment, and this is it. The world tries to add them up. So we tend to ignore that in a very simple way, what we're talking about here, these elements. We tend to ignore that our awareness, our identity, our feeling of who we are, what we like, what we don't like, what we're worried about, what we're totally elated about, and all the various things that can come up there. We tend to ignore that this is not going to last. It's just like you came into this milieu, into this realm, this that we call the human realm, and here you are, and tick, 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 to put it literally, or to maybe put it symbolically, categorically, or astonishingly. Take your pick. I like astonishing. Ordinary astonishment. If you see what this is, you will no longer be bored with anything. Nothing will ever bore you again. Not because everything changes, it's because it doesn't change. Chuckle, chuckle. I'd like to have some questions around this, if you have them. Yes?
I don't know that I've ever heard you talk about the elements maybe one time, and I'm wondering what the importance is or what their connection to practice is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I've talked about everything else. So I thought, maybe we'll talk about the elements. So I think I've been thinking about those somewhat, about the earth. And as you know, I read a lot, so I run into that situation here and there. But something about that we're so attached to this situation, we're so attached, we ignore that there's all these processes, these four elements, the four basic ones, and then air and space and consciousness. The way I teach is I try to meet you where you're at. I try to meet each person where they're at if they'll come and sit in front of me, and I try to teach in such a way that it's hopefully it'll register with as many people as possible. But I usually don't give specific directions to groups of people. To individuals, I might actually tell someone to start practicing White Tara practice because I think they need to do some kind of a creation completion practice because of the way they are presenting themselves to me. And another person I might just say, just do shikantaza. Another person I'll encourage them to block step, which is the 4-hour. So everyone's a little bit different based on, not that I'm evaluating it, it just shows up. It's almost like they're telling me. Someone sits down, and even though they think I'm telling them, they're actually telling me what I need to tell them by the way they function. Everything from their body language, to their tone of voice, to what they're saying, to what they're not saying that is obvious. More.
I'm wondering how you see the relationship between the elements in shikantaza or the elements in just practice in general.
I think it's a contemplation. I don't think it's necessary to necessarily follow the breath or focus on the body. I think it's a matter of a kind of a touch and go situation. Just touch on that. Don't let it drop out of sight completely. So you could. It's not a direct instruction, but you could reflect on that if that helps you get grounded, so that you can work with whatever is showing up in the consciousness and the awareness, what's coming and going, because that's the part. Those elements are the ones that are going back into the dirt. And yet we don't really realize that we're made up of food. We have to eat other things that are alive in order to keep this alive. We just kind of block that out. Yes?
Is it similar to your alternating sense awareness practice?
It has the alternating sense awareness practice, where I say usually it has something to do with someone who is in trouble with something. There's something that is haunting them or bothering them or really difficult. It's like just they can't stay there. They can't sit. They can't meditate. Then I might give that alternating sense awareness practice, which I call ASAP, just for the hell of it. But and that means to pick something like sense of touch and sense of seeing. It's kind of up to you. If you're auditory, then maybe, as you are, it might be good to go from how this feels to how this sounds, to how this feels to how this sounds. You can either do it randomly. You could link it to the breath moving back and forth. I wouldn't do it a lot, but I would do it enough to, rather than go into some kind of a satipatthana or some kind of a ancient way of closing the eyes, scanning the body or something like that. I would say, I would say use that so that you're actually watching movement on some level. Because the way I teach is to watch movement, not to create a stillness, not to create a meditator. And again, I say this over and over, and I want to make sure people know I'm not correcting anyone. I'm not correcting His Holiness. I'm not correcting. They teach however they want. I just can't help but teach out of how this looks. Go ahead.
You just said that the ASAP practice is maybe to help somebody, you did not use this word, but to break up some negativity with awareness of other senses, to bring some other senses.
Exactly, because the other senses, the thought process has no time constraints. It doesn't even know about time. You probably noticed that. You can think abstractly about the future, the past, but you'll know, especially when you're dreaming, the whole thing is just shot. You're not going to get a reference point from anything. There's no reference point in a dream. You can't find anything there's no safety net in a dream. You're totally vulnerable. So it's more about using that as kind of like maybe like a training wheel kind of thing. This is real, when relatively real. It's solid. So I'll have my body, gravity. I often say, don't forget gravity. It's not forgetting you. So you're here. It's holding you down. Without gravity, I won't go into the metaphors I've used in the past of how difficult life would be if there was no gravity, and if you had to hang onto tree limbs, which are also hanging onto the trees. The trees are hanging onto the ground, so they know that that's coming.
In contrast, you call these 5 elements, the 5 bhutas, a contemplation. Mm-hmm. And what is a contemplation?
A contemplation is deliberately going to something and reflecting or thinking about it. So deliberately think about, you're sitting and deliberately go to the element of earth or solidity or what's being contracted. Gravity is contracting, and the body is there's a contraction happening here that creates with skin and bones and everything. It creates this solid form that lives on other living things in order to keep going. So there's that part of it. So to contemplate that would be to just focus on that, and just as a reference point. And so to give, just to bring the awareness about an aspect of our existence has to do with something that is not going to last. So it's that. Go ahead.
Is it an analytical practice as opposed to you just contemplate Earth and see what comes up?
So I wouldn't meddle with anybody in that area. Some people who are analytical, this would be a really good place to analyze. If you have a natural tendency to rotate things and look at the top and the bottom and how it falls this way or how it falls this way, when this comes along and that changes and that happens and this changes. So I would leave it up to you, to each individual. Or you could just, the way I do it is I just look at it. I don't think very much. Not particularly adept at thinking. So I would leave it up to the individual. Some people who are very analytical and very conceptual, that would be a good set of Legos. More about that. It's good questions.
I was just curious about what you said about thinking that there is only one moment. Well, this was different, but you said there is only one moment the world tries to add them up.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you're talking about one moment?
Well, I'm sure you've noticed, I'm pointing out the obvious, I'm sure you've noticed the two thens, the future and the past. You're never in either one of them. It's always now. And everybody said, of course, it's always now. But to actually, when the awareness, the consciousness, when your Buddha nature, when you realize what this is, all bets are off. You can't even gamble anymore. You can only gamble if there's a future. And, go ahead.
What does the future or the past, or what does now become when it becomes the future or the past?
The becoming that's the misunderstanding. That's for existentialist thinkers who are incredibly sophisticated circle of thought analysis and structural stuff. Go ahead.
With the future and the past, is there any, I don't know, validity
Yeah, there's a relative truth, relative truth. All relative truth is partial truth, so you get part of it and it's really intense. This moves through space and hits that. I mean, that way, yeah, but then, you know who's to blame for that sound? Me. No. What were you gonna say? Senchu's to blame for it, or is she? She probably left. She's to blame for that. So is it the glass? Is it is it my hand? Is it the tree? Should we go back and convict the tree? Or could we convict the person who carved that? He's up in Wisconsin. Might be hard to extradite. So, I mean, you know, I'm being silly, but I'm just saying, the ego mind, the self-centered mind, wants proof. It wants to know. It wants to know, no. Not that one. It wants to KNOW. It wants to know what that is, and that's how it gets its safety. It feels safe if it knows something else. So that's a misunderstanding. Just a misunderstanding. More. These are good questions. I like
the
it.
other thing I was wondering about was when you were saying thinking has no time.
Did I say that?
Yes.
Okay.
You said
Hold me
that.
to it. Did I say that?
That also was confusing to me.
Ask a question about it.
What
If you
is
would, please.
what is thinking?
I have no idea.
Does it have? I'm just wondering about the qualities. How can somebody have qualities outside of time and space?
What? The problem with the thinking thing is there's automatic, and with most people, automatically we're imputing or thinking there's someone generating these thoughts. But we just receive thoughts. There's no one to generate anything. This is the other word, there's only one other word that really fits this, and that's freedom. You're free from the tyranny of thoughts. It's just a great thing. It doesn't mean they won't come and knock on the door and ring the doorbell and make faces in the window. Sure they will, but you don't have to believe it. You don't have to disbelieve it. You don't disbelieve it, because that sets up another polarity where suddenly it's a high resolution ignorance is disbelieving something. High resolution feels like a fact. So we get sucked into the fact and fiction of everything all the time. It's just coming and going everywhere. Just all you have to do is listen to somebody talk for 3 minutes. Doesn't matter if it's a Sangha person, or if it's someone who's a meditator, or someone who is your family member that has no idea what you're even doing in a monastery. More?
If something is...
This is great. I like to have help.
If something is not one thing, does it make it its opposite?
Say more.
When you say thinking has no time, does it mean it has an absence of time?
So, if you go that way, then we're going back into the polarity of it. So the only reason I'm saying that is because we tend to assume that there's some kind of longevity happening. And it's not that there isn't something, but that's all part of the thought. There's a thought about the longevity that's part of the thought. There's a thought about the absence or no absence. So we get trapped. We get very, very rarefied. Go and read Friedrich Hegel. You want somebody who really, really thinks a lot. I'm just picking on him because it's his work is so full of assumptions and presumptions and peregrinations.
One more question about this, maybe more.
Please.
You've talked about, and the teachings have talked about not being found. Is the not being found just a way to work with things, or is that the nature of things?
No, you really can't find anything.
So when you say thinking has no time, it's not...
Not a state of being. It's not some aspect of it. Time is it's an invention based on watching stuff move, including the clock hand. sun coming up and going, kind of conditioned to thinking things are happening.
So the not being found is
It's-
that a more accurate way of saying it relatively?
Yeah, it would be, yeah. Not being found is the only real finding, is to find that there isn't. It's called, in tradition, more technical way, it's called shunyata, or emptiness. Go ahead.
I'm just
This is exciting.
You've talked about the disappointment
Yeah.
before, and that sounds like the greatest disappointment is to
Yeah.
um,
So since it's not two, since the way to relatively describe it is not two, then the disappointment doesn't have to go away. It isn't like you get somewhere and suddenly no longer, even the freedom is the kind of freedom, it's not relative freedom, it's ultimate freedom. So therefore we can't, as the traditional way of saying it, you can't wrap your mind around it because there is no mind.
how is it that something cannot be found and yet have such sharp characteristics?
I think it's the power of consciousness to congeal into something. It's to go back to, we were to talk about maybe one of the teachings or metaphors for that is the 12 links in the chain of existence, where vidya comes out of probably hot and cold. Some kind of tension happened that creates ignorance of everything else. So it comes up into some kind of a bunch. It contracts into earth. And then something about this situation, and we don't really know exactly what, scientifically, you could say, what consciousness is. We may be able to know through consciousness itself, but that may not come up with a conclusion that would satisfy, I used to be confused, but now I got it.
A question from Kozan up in Traverse City. She asks, at the start you mentioned space and consciousness as elements. Are the terms used interchangeably? If not, how would you guide us to explore the element of consciousness?
Look at the wall. Everything I talked about, the concepts arise in consciousness. And air is a space, or sky is a metaphor for it, but consciousness itself, you can't find it. It doesn't belong to anyone. No one actually has consciousness. If you find your true nature, you are consciousness. Just in a relative way of saying it. Michael?
How can we find out true nature if it's fundamentally unfindable?
Yeah, exactly. Look at everything that isn't your nature, or that looks like it's not you. Dirt, rugs, trees, canaries, coconuts. That's not me. Look at everything that's not you. Thoughts. Do a lot of it. The whole idea of concluding and including and concluding, those interesting dynamics. It's just whatever happens, just include it. Just include. Rather than take what shows up and go and abandon it by concluding something else. More?
If causes are untraceable, then how can we see dependent origination?
It's right in front of you. It's in the mirror. Go look, as I've said, I don't know, probably dozens of times, if not hundreds. Go look in the mirror if you think you have any say-so about anything. And just pick out one thing about your appearance that you said, other than grow a beard or something like that. But that's working with something that's already has shown up. People are always trying to get control, have facelifts and do, have hair implants or something to try to get a certain kind of, that are very, very attached to appearance. But what's already occurred, go look at Rumi. He'll look at you. look in his eyes, it was like he recognizes everybody here. He, this time last year, he was not, well, he was here, but he was tucked away, so to speak. When was he born? He was born the 19th? November, so he hasn't been around long. But just look at your own face, or go look at a child. Something about the whole situation that's very, very fishy when we think that something is real. Something's very fishy there. No offense to the fish. Yes.
Sometimes you talk about relative truth being partial. Is there something do those all add up to an ultimate understanding?
No, it's just a way of talking about it. It doesn't imply that, if you can get all the stuff, if you had really big buggy eyes, so you wouldn't miss anything. In other words, if you could see everything, would you come to a conclusion? It's ultimate.
Can we go into not being found with our characteristics?
I think that's the only way you can do it. You don't have to get rid of anything. There isn't anything that isn't Buddha nature. But we can say that conceptually, and people do in books, and people write about it, stretch it way out so you can spend your, better part of your vacation reading about the Uttara Tantra or Ratnagotra Vibhaga, which you've been reading, or where's the Avatamsaka, or the Lotus Sutra, which I'm just mentioning these because I like to drop names. Complicated. I mean, you can take this and stretch out those, but I'm telling you, I'm saying to you, I'm suggesting to you, it's right in front of you. It's right in front of you, my friends. It's right in front of you. And this is the reason I encourage people to sit down and face the wall. If you're a Buddhist, I don't care if you're a Buddhist or not. If you're a Buddhist, we'll use those forms. If you're not a Buddhist, then at least sit down and hold still and watch what continues to move. Because what continues to move is that which is taking you into the confusion, and it's a trap. It's like a big circle, and you can't think your way out of that. But you can see what it is, and when you see what it is, because nothing is separate, you're liberated. You're liberated you're right at the root of the lotus, right in the dirt. You're liberated right there. The Buddha in the palm of your hand. Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the lotus, right there, right now, this second. It isn't even a second. That's extra. Even the word moment is a hype.
When you say include until there's nothing left to include, how could there be nothing left to include?
That's what you conclude. You're not smiling. It's interesting. What are you thinking about?
How confused I am by your response.
How to what?
How confused I am about your response.
I like that. Stay confused. Don't get unconfused. Just look at the confusion. Confusion is your Dharma gate. Don't abandon who you are. Make friends with yourself is another way Trungpa Rinpoche would say. Make friends with yourself on a deep level. How do you do that? You go down into the confusion where all the unfriendliness is, and you just be with that, befriend that in a deep way, which can be very, very confusing and painful. I mean, it can be. It isn't necessarily. People have different kinds of karma, come into this path and come into this life, born to these parents, or however it may show up in so many different ways. I think, considering how I was raised, I'm amazed that I'm in here. I'm in a monastery, let alone being a monk. I'm just amazed at it. There was two magazines, Reader's Digest and Outdoor Life, and I think I got to subscribe to Boy's Life or something like that. Nobody read anything. And I'm not going to tell you about my early religious education either, because I can't say those words on YouTube. Yes.
Question from Bhaskar in Houston.
Oscar.
He asks, how does the concept of karma that seems to be central to Buddhism tie up with the concept of no past?
It ties up because there is because of the three poisons, there's a belief, a disbelief, and an ignorance that is just basically, it's a very simple, and it creates that kind of a dimension that goes back and goes forward, where we get attached. Hope and fear of open space, not knowing is open space. We fear that, so we run towards something else, which is called fixation. And so what's being recommended is don't do anything. Sit down, hold still, and watch the movement. Don't participate in it. Don't ignore it. Don't participate, passion. Don't fight with it, aggression. And don't look away or ignore it, ignorance. Just look at it. Just look at it. This is where the something like the mirror, the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi gets its metaphors from. Wooden man. The stone woman gets up dancing. The wooden man begins to sing. Impossible situations. But it's used so if you introduce that into your thinking mind, it helps kind of make your constructs about the nature of reality kind of crumble. Because this is a teaching coming from Buddha nature, from enlightened beings. I don't think you can come up with a metaphor like that without having a tremendous amount of clarity about the nature of the indescribable. You might have to look at the indescribable for maybe years, maybe decades before you were able to say that as a teaching device for people, to have enough confidence that is unconditional. Confidence that's based on success and failure is not unconditional. Unconditional confidence means you know this. You know it. You're certain about it, but it's not a certainty based on proof. There's a book title I like by Jamgon Kongtrul called The Torch of Certainty. Never read it. I read just enough of it to know that I don't know if I want to do this. You probably read that, haven't you? Yeah. I might have let you brag.
Maybe once.
Maybe once.
Maybe, kind of.
Maybe. Yeah. It's basically about non-drill practice. There are 4 foundation practices: prostrations, mantra, mandala practice, and guru yoga. But it's very complicated. But I like the title of the book. Yes.
You had said that the only way into not being found is with our characteristics. What is it about that feels so threatening then?
That's the self-centeredness, the ego part of it. We think we have to get rid of we have to be better. We have to get rid of our temper. We have to get rid of our warlike. We have to shed all of that. And some teachings talk about it that way because that's probably the way some people need to hear this. The way I teach it is you're already genuine with the characteristics, with the tension, with the disturbances. Buddha, awakened. You're already awake. We just keep, because we're afraid of seeing that kind of open dimension. We're afraid of it because if there's any grasping or imputation or belief in a separate self, you think that you're somebody else, then that's threatening. And so we'll cover it up. Some people will cover it up, can be highly intelligent. Maybe they've read more than any of us all combined. Highly intelligent, highly scholarly, and be able to explain things to us that we can't quite get a handle on. Not awake. Awakening is complete. It's a complete blowout, but nothing happens. Not to blowout, nothing happens. As His Holiness the 16th Karmapa Rangjung Rigpa Dorji said on his deathbed in 1981, nothing happens. He made it into a bumper sticker because of the force of his presence was so powerful. Anything he said could be a bumper sticker. Yes.
Are we afraid that awakening might look as crazy as we are right now?
Yeah, we're afraid of our insanity. This is one of the teachings in the Tibetan tradition is the crazy wisdom. And it's crazy because from the ego point of view, it might look pretty crazy. And from our point of view, we might look like we're going crazy. You might think, I'm getting worse, I'm getting worse. No, you're just seeing what you've been hiding out from. Just seeing what you're hiding out from. More? Bless. Yes, Andrew.
Is consciousness created?
There's probably some aspect of it that is like that, but I think that you could call created, but you know, this is the way this is handled in the Yogacara tradition is Vijnapti Matra, or consciousness only. And there's different ways that that's used. So, but there's teachings that try to get at that, but so we refer to it, but yet if you look at it closely, you can't find anything. You can only find it if something occurs in it. So if nothing occurs in it, then where's the consciousness at? So it's not an actual object. It shows up in a form, a human form, or a form of a garter snake. Yes.
I'm still trying to understand the difference between the sense fields and the 5 elements.
You know, so body, you just sense the body. You sense it. You know about it conceptually. It's a body. You can kind of feel there's a solid quality to it. So that's just you're just sensing that through, just like you may not know that there's you may not be able to sense any blood flowing in your veins or something, but if your stomach growls, that's liquid, you know, and a combination of that and pressure moving from one side to the other. So you're just experiencing that, and you experience it. You think about it. Oh, maybe I'm hungry. You know, we experience it in such a mundane way that we just tie everything together. Well, it's my stomach. The 5 skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept or thinking and labeling and naming and interpreting, and consciousness of the 6 sense fields, all coming back towards the body through sound, cardinals, canaries, raindrops outside the window, other people's laughter coming back. So it's a matter of the elements are just basically have some kind of a stability to them in terms of looking at them. Fire is hot, no question there. Wind moves. Space permits things to come through it. And earth is hard, and stop, and is a mountain. So it's that part of our world that has different qualities to it, and we call them the bhutas, or the elements. They're elemental constructs that without them we can't be here. They show up all over the world, and they show up in the body of the earth and the body of this body. It's like someone said to Trungpa Rinpoche once, I don't know where, I wasn't there when it happened, I don't think. I don't remember things very well. But someone was kind of challenging him about, because he was eating junk food and stuff. And I think they said, Rinpoche, why are you eating, that's terrible for your body? And, I don't know if they didn't comment on the other stuff he was putting in his body. But he says, it's bad for your body to do that. He said, the whole world is my body. Yeah, end of conversation, I guess. I mean, what do you say about that? Whole world. So, but there's something to that. That doesn't mean that he felt like he was as big as Earth, but his feeling about everything was incredibly intimate. And I'm speaking on his behalf. He's not here, but my understanding of that, contemplating that, and thinking of that, and then the way I understand it in this moment is that he was just sensitive to everything. So there wasn't anything to correct or fix. So, and he wasn't in a position, nor am I, nor are you, to interrupt the karma, the incredible force of karmic situation that's happening. But what can you do? You can awaken. This is not a mundane path about success and failure. Awakening is not success. It's ultimate. You actually understand what this is. Complete fearlessness from then on. Even death. I'm not saying you wouldn't run away from some imminent pain, of course. You have nerve endings. You're not stupid. But your fundamental understanding is clarified. You're not also sitting back and say, bring on the death. You're not saying that either. You're just not it's just not a big consideration, because everything is being born and dying. You see it everywhere. If you look at it, everything is dying. Our thought patterns are born and then they die, and then our worries are born and then they die. coming and going, coming and going. It's a big mess, yes?
Are these ways, the elements and the sense fields, are they ways of looking at movement and just grouping them into different ways of ascertaining them?
Yeah, so you could contemplate that. Just contemplate, spend some time contemplating that, and then contemplate the sense fields, and move back and forth. Because I mean, I can go in and explain this to you, but this is something you should look at. So, there's just this basic beingness of being here, and that has to do with these elements. And there are different. If you go back in the Indian tradition, you're going to find a different way of looking at this, and they handle the whole thing differently than Buddhist tradition. And also in the Jain tradition, it also shows up there too in ancient India. So, go ahead, please.
I guess I'm just wondering if there's is there a difference between flashing on the element of air by looking at our breath or feeling our breath, and flashing on the sense of touch by feeling our breath?
So those are, you can't separate anything. So that's the way that shows up. So the way that's showing up to you is accurate. And when I say accurate, I'm not as opposed to inaccurate, but it's thorough, it's complete. Samyak. You're completely looking at that. Completely looking at that. Just like, not to be funny about it, but flatulence is also air. Just air coming out of the body, out of the bowels, air coming out of the lungs, and air going back in. This is the process of a living being that looks like us. It looks like there is somebody.
Is the idea to look at something that's moving and put it into one of those categories?
You could do that. You could say this is Earth, this is, because what that does is that brings something into the awareness that actually has a strong relative dynamic to it. A strong relative dynamic is really important, so you can understand that you are not just that. That's why we sit down in front of a wall and hold very still. That's why the only thing I recommend, besides all the senses are open, including the eyes, is stillness. And it doesn't have to be 3 hours of stillness. It can be 30 seconds, and then you can wiggle, like the meditation I teach to children, the frog meditation, the monkey meditation. Best way to teach children is through contrast, not through concepts. They're not ready for that yet. So run around like a monkey, sit still like a frog. They get it immediately. You were there when we did that? No, you weren't there? They get it immediately. They know how to sit still. So you're to put it, to encourage you, you're on the right track. That's how you do it. But it might not show up for someone else that way, but for you, that's how that's showing up. And I would say, please proceed on that. All we're trying to do is get an idea by using, like, the sense of touch doesn't lie, basically. Doesn't lie. Sense of sight doesn't lie. This is why magicians are popular, because they have a way of manipulating physical reality that look like something's happening that is not. So then we get pretty excited about that because we know that can't happen. So this is why sometimes this is called, in some traditions, in Tibetan tradition, is ordinary magic. It's ordinary, but it's totally magical. At the same time, another duality, or another ordinary and magic, how does that come together? Well, it does, because it's never been separate. You don't have to bring anything together that's never been separate. You don't have to attain enlightenment, my friends, my enemies. You don't have to attain anything. Just find out what is already the case. It's already true. It might not, it might have a lot of wrinkles in it, but it's a truth. Wrinkled Buddha. Michael.
How can we clarify an ingrained misunderstanding like having a self?
Just continue to look at it. Don't agree, don't disagree, don't look away. And if you do nothing with it, because of the very nature of impermanence, if you do nothing with it, it can't last. It'll start to molt. It'll start to shed its skin. But if you fight with it, or look at it, or push on it, or pull on it, or project onto it ideas, then it might be changing all over the place. But your fixation is so strong that you're still paranoid. More? That's good. It's a matter of...
How can we tell if we're pushing or pulling or looking away?
I don't know of anything else to say other than persistence. You have to want this. You know, we all have the desire to move the desire into, I want to know what this is. You don't have to, don't believe what I say, don't believe what the Buddha said, don't believe, disbelieve anything. Find out yourself. Work out your salvation with diligence as the human being that is represented by this figure. He said when he was passing into parinirvana, as far as the records go. I looked at it, now you need to look at it. I've helped you as much as I can. Would be 40 years of teaching. Andrew,
Are the elements other than consciousness created?
are the elements other than what?
Consciousness? For a better word?
Fundamentally, it's consciousness. My understanding of it is only, I can't think of another word that would fit it other than that. But it's just a different forms. Consciousness is not separate from the thing that it finds. That's why I think that's where the magical part comes in. It's not only the space in which things occur, it's the thing that occurs. And it's very, very seductive to a self-centered mind, or that aspect of consciousness that gathers together in a clump and tries to act like a piece of dirt, tries to act like solid, me and my life, my feeling, and me and who's insulted me, and me and who likes me. You always notice that your friends accept you no matter how you act, because they really like you, because you're both, born in fire signs or whatever. Who knows the causes and conditions that bring that thing about, but fundamentally, that just comes apart. Anything put together, all compounded things come apart. Nothing lasts. It might take 1,000, 10,000 years. Just like the ice is melting. How many millions of years has some of that ice been there? Melting. Nothing lasts. More?
Is consciousness compounded?
When it appears in this way, when it appears as not separate from what's appearing in it, then there's a compounded aspect to it. Yes. But it doesn't last. Joseph.
There's a Star Trek The Next Generation episode where Data visits a primitive culture, and there's a teacher talking about the elements. And he kind of ridicules her and says, no, that's not what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm wondering what's going on there. What is it about the modern world that devalues the elements?
Well, I didn't see that episode, but I know who Data is. He's the droid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so someone else was saying that to him, or he was saying it?
He was saying that the elements, that's, kind
Yeah.
of the modern view is elements are primitive.
His view was that?
Yeah.
So what was your question?
Yes. What is the connection between the spiritual path and the elements?
Awareness. That's the connection, or however you want to say it. Focused consciousness, which is awareness, but unfocused consciousness works also. It might even be more aware than focused. Focused consciousness knows about stuff. It's materialistic, but unfocused consciousness doesn't miss anything because there's no agenda. There's no past, there's no future, there's no grasping, there's no rejecting, there's no shutting down. Those are the three. And really, there's not even any elements. It's a way of talking about this. Go ahead.
Can completely unfocused consciousness see movement?
Yeah, it see it relatively. It would see it relative to, one finger moving and the other finger holding still. So it would see it through contrast. You want to disagree with me? Any more? Robert?
I'm asking for a friend.
For what?
A friend.
Oh. Let me see if we got a volunteer here. Yes.
which is a lie.
Oh, I thought you wanted a friend. I was going to find one for you. You said you're asking for one of your friends who wants to know because you don't really want to know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Got it.
But actually, yeah, I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
You're getting what I appreciate
Like,
very much.
There's a Sangha, can't find better friends than the Sangha.
Yes, it's nothing better. Is freedom cutting away from the past?
No, not. It's not even including the past. Including the past is a practice, including. But freedom can't see anything else. It's not a relative situation. We have to use, I mean, I don't have to. I could have stayed home, but I'm here. You guys want to know stuff? I know a couple things. And one of the things I know is what you're about to ask me.
Or when I think of things, since you already know, I'll ask anyway.
Okay.
When I think of things that I've done that are humiliating and embarrassing, and I feel horrified and sad.
Yes, that's ego.
What's ego? The horrified and
The
sad?
horrified and sad is ego. You need to keep asking though, because that's not the end of the story. That's chapter 2.
So, is looking at the horrified and sad a gateway?
Totally. But don't solve it. I mean, you can have something that you've done in the past that you feel bad about or feel remorseful about. Just look at it. Don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to, you really don't even have to apologize, because apology is a highly refined, sophisticated form of narcissism. It's, I'm the one who did this, so therefore I will apologize. Now I've gotten rid of that. Don't do it. And I'm not saying that if you step on somebody's foot, you say, whoops, sorry about that. Or you said you were going to do the dinner dishes and you totally spaced it, and somebody comes and said, I thought you were going to do the, so, oops, sorry about that. I'll do it for you next time, or make up for it. But to go into some kind of a labyrinth of suffering where you're torturing yourself because of some horrible thing you did, it might never go away, but that will help you. It will help you help others, because you know you don't have to get rid of that. If you can really begin to have compassion, which isn't feeling sorry for yourself, but really understand deeply. Compassion is actually dispassion, because it's not about a feeling about somebody. It's not about sympathy. It's about a deep, deep understanding of the nature of suffering, which is what the first thing, as far as we know what the Buddha said. Suffering is caused by wanting something else, even wanting to get rid of your difficulty. Don't do it. It's a Dharma gate. I have several of those. Want to hear them?
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to tell you.
But I want to hear. I look at that.
Go to the Akashic Records. They're written all over the place up there. So that's a good question. So anything that is haunting you for something you've done or a mistake you've made, don't forget it. Don't block it out. But also don't use it to reinforce the self-centeredness that wants to get off the hook, that wants to be forgiven. This is just a misunderstanding. It's not wrong, and there's whole spiritual paths that are about forgiveness. I'm not correcting anybody. Anybody wants to write books on it or do this, please do it. Go ahead. But if you're listening to me, I'm saying, don't do that. Don't necessarily go that way.
What about wanting to get away from it, which seems like the same thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Just look at it and be grateful for that. I mean, that actually helps you see the nature of ego. Be grateful for that. It's not grateful that you did something terrible, years ago or whatever. That it's not that you're, when you did it and it's gone, but you're haunting yourself with the memory of it. So just let it, keep you humble. That's pretty literal too. You don't have to get better. You just have to be genuine. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our chant books. I'd like to remind everybody that in 2 weeks, Sokuzan will be in New York teaching for several days, and hope to see you there if you're in the New York area.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san, ji-ji-hu. Shi-son-bu-san-mo-ko-san. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.